Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking Inianga Omiela's absolutely groundbreaking work, The Triangular Prison. We're going to dive deep into the invisible systems that govern our behavior, our compliance, and ultimately our freedom. We're looking closely at walls that are built not out of stone or steel, but out of tradition, religion, and education.
So let me ask you something. When did you first learn to just swallow your questions? Think back to that childhood moment, maybe sitting at the dinner table or in a classroom, when you realized that asking the wrong question carried a massive, silent social cost. You noticed something that didn't quite add up, you opened your mouth, and suddenly the temperature in the room just dropped. You didn't get an explanation, you got a warning, and you learned right then and there to swallow that question.
This is exactly how this invisible prison gets installed before we even have the vocabulary for it. Take this scene from the source text. A 6-year-old girl in the new state asks her mother why the people in the next village are dangerous. Her mother doesn't say, "I don't know," and she doesn't offer any facts. Instead, she offers a calibration. She says, "Be careful. You do not know what they are capable of." That chilling drop in the room's temperature teaches us that the absolute price of curiosity is exclusion. It's a feeling, installed quietly, efficiently, and totally without drama. To deconstruct this whole invisible system, here is our blueprint for today. 1. The invisible room. 2. The 3 walls. 3. The mortars binding us. 4. The weaponized machine. And 5. Finding the fire. Let's get into it.
Starting with Section 1, the invisible room. This is the space most human beings are born into without ever once seeing the walls. Now, this quote from Soren Kierkegaard perfectly captures the core tragedy of this invisible room. It's a lifetime spent conforming to inherited rules, but at the cost of your true self. The prison does its deepest work not through physical force, but by managing human consciousness so incredibly well that we actually mistake the walls for our own personality. Which brings us to Section 2, the 3 walls. This is the actual structural architecture of the prison. These 3 walls tell you exactly who you are, what God demands, and what is considered true. Tradition tells you who you are by saying, "Hey, this is how our people have always done it." Religion says, "God has spoken and this institution holds the microphone." And education says, "Here is what is true, and here is the approved answer you have to write down to pass." And together, these walls often punish the independent mind that dares to read past the syllabus or question the elder. But we really have to draw a clear line here between the fire and the ashes. The fire, that's the beautiful, hard-won wisdom of our ancestors. Think of a grandmother in Ijaw country who knows exactly which plants treat a fever based on 500 years of accumulated survival data. That is the fire. The ashes, on the other hand, is tradition captured by power to enforce conformity. It's using that exact same elder authority to silence a valid question. The form survives, but the protective purpose is totally lost.
Let's move to Section 3, the mortars binding us. Because as you know, bricks alone cannot stand without mortar.
These 6 mortars are genuine human emotions captured by institutions to keep you inside. Let's look at fear. It's incredibly powerful. The famous ash conformity experiments in the 1950s proved that human beings will literally deny what they can plainly see with their own eyes just to avoid social exclusion. And modern neuroscience backs this right up. The brain processes being cast out of a community through the exact same neural pathways as physical pain. No wonder we conform, right?
But you want to know the most counterintuitive mechanism of them all? It's love. Love is actually the most durable mortar in this entire prison, because the people enforcing your silence are often your own family. A mother telling her daughter not to ask questions isn't trying to imprison her. She's fiercely trying to protect her from the very real dangers of crossing the community. Love, when captured by an institution, becomes the superglue that holds the invisible walls in place.
And ultimately, the prison becomes entirely self-sustaining through the 6th mortar, which is shame. Shame is wild because it operates in an empty room. It doesn't need a community, it doesn't need an elder or an active threat. It makes you guard yourself long after the external threat is completely gone. Why? Because some part of you has concluded that asking the question now would mean admitting you were complicit during all those years you stayed silent. The prison no longer needs guards because you have been expertly trained to guard yourself.
Moving to Section 4, the weaponized machine. Now that we understand the architecture, let's examine what happens when this machine operates at scale to extract from the individual. If we look at the economic impact of tradition, we can contrast a beautiful practice like Tirapaga in the Niger Delta, where communities share the financial burden of a funeral to help the grieving family, against the weaponized tradition of a befitting burial. We see cases perfectly captured in Mariama Ba's observations, where families are forced into massive debt, borrowing millions for festive funeral ceremonies while the deceased's medical debts were totally ignored. The tradition literally demands the living become poor to honor the dead. Looking at the religion wall, we see how hope is captured. Historical data traces the modern prosperity gospel directly from 1950s U.S. healing revivals, to Archbishop Benson Idahosa training in Texas in 1971, to his massive 1972 Benin City Crusade, all the way up to modern megachurches operating today. It operates by capturing human hope, almost like a lottery ticket. It's the promise of a deferred payout that renews itself on its own failures, keeping the poorest communities investing their disposable income into an institution with absolutely no structural mechanism for returning it. This begs a truly chilling question. What happens when a community is completely severed from outside reference points? Well, it's perfectly exemplified by the 1978 Jonestown tragedy in Guyana. It didn't start with a madman. It started as a refuge that offered genuine community when the state wouldn't. But over time, the walls closed in. By the end, parents, driven by captured loyalty and completely isolated from outside information, gave their own children poison. The institution didn't arrive as a prison. It arrived as the only door that had ever opened. Looking objectively at the source text's economic analysis, the original biblical patterns celebrated the building of infrastructure and cooperative resources. Think about Joseph in Egypt. He built granaries for food security to survive a massive famine. The early church held possessions in common, so there wasn't a needy person among them. This is a stark contrast with modern captured institutions that prioritize seating capacity, private aircraft, and empty auditoriums over community welfare and healthcare cooperatives. Finally, Section 5, Finding the Fire. Let's discover how we can break free without losing our sense of belonging. The solution here is conscious inheritance. This is the daily practice of asking a single, honest question about any feeling that directs your behavior. Did I choose this, or was it mixed for me? It empowers you to keep the genuine love, the actual vision, and the warmth of your community, while actively rejecting the blind compliance that its institutions demand. Basically, you are allowed to take the fire and leave the bricks. And this quote right here summarizes our entire journey today. True freedom is simply recognizing that the door is only guarded by the version of yourself that the institution built. Once you name those mortars, the memory, the fear, the love, and the shame, they begin to dissolve. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final vital question for your own life. Are you holding the fire or just the ashes? As you go about your week, look closely at the walls around you and keep asking the very questions they told you to swallow. Thanks so much for hanging out with me to explore this, and I'll see you next time.